Perfect. All right. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. My name is Efemeral. As was noted in the bio, I'm not a hip hop artist. I am a poet. And so when the advertising first came out and it said that I would perform, I was like, these guys are going to be disappointed because I can't rhyme for the life of me. But I did want to begin with that land acknowledgement that I am on the unceded territory of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh nations. But further than that, I wanted to acknowledge the fact that I come to this conversation around hip hop as someone who is not African American. And as we all know, hip hop, its origins are in the African American artistic community. And so I wanted to begin by saying that. And the way this presentation is going to go, I'll start with a poem because, you know, I rhyme a little bit. But then I'm going to kind of basically explore how hip hop has affected me. And I grew up in the 90s and the early 2000s. That's when I was a teenager, so y'all can age me now. But it had a huge impact on my my person as a young Muslim woman growing up on the West Coast. But before we get into all of that, and then at the end, I really want to have a conversation. So I know you guys are all muted right now, but I really want you to ask me questions and I want to have a conversation, time permitting. And I'll show you a little bit of a music video. Yeah, it's about 5 minutes, and we'll get through it. All right, bismillah. So there is a poem that I did do for the Who Am I challenge on Instagram. I was nominated by my brother Yusuf Chroma. And I did write a poem that goes a little something like this. Who am I, you ask? I figure that there should be a disclaimer. Not really. Go figure out for yourself who you are, but in the meantime, between time, your persistence got me spilling secrets. I am spilled ink, flowing freely through the Nile, the Willamette, and the Fraser, 3 rivers braided under this ebony skin, intertwined just in time to pour into my beating heart. Do you hear it? This challenge got me praying that this heartbeat, this rhythm of who I am, runs faster than Jamaican lightning, a bolt that runs a track straight through that minaret, speakers praying that who I truly am will always call back the parts of me that I wish weren't there. But until then, I am dusty fragments weeping on the farthest outskirts of Medina. Beware this dusty traveler sweeping, then selling you her broken wares, for she keeps restocking her Kaaba, forgetting that before illallah came la ilaha. These are a number of different influences. When I say back in the day, I mean back in the day. Back in the early 2000s, there was a website, muslimhiphop.com. The address is at the bottom. And muslimhiphop.com in 2003 was not what it looks like today. So I actually had to go back into like the Wayback Machine. I don't know if y'all have heard of the Wayback Machine, but Wayback Machine is this website that allows you to look at what websites looked like back in the day and not what they look like now. And so I had to go back and I had to see, I got to see, luckily they had archived material since like 2003, 2004, and I got to see what was on that site back then. And I recognized some of the faces and the names. So we got, on the right-hand side, a screenshot of a group called MPAC. And when I say Muslim hip hop, I'm listening to like some really underground, like this wasn't the Muslims that have made it into the mainstream. These are the Muslim artists that, it was just not as popular. Today you have people like Khalid Siddiqui, and you have, you know, just mainstream artists, but when I'm talking back in the day, I'm talking like people did not know this. This was really underground. Outlandish kind of made it. They're the group at the bottom. They're a boy band out of Denmark. They've since disbanded, unfortunately. Poetic Pilgrimage at the top were literally, I think, the only Muslim female rappers that I got to listen to. Misunderstood, who is also a part of this, she was rapping back then as well, so I got to hear some of her. Baraka Blue, and then below that you got Kumasi. They were part of a record label actually called Remarkable Current. The entire record label was, it was all types of different music, but Muslim hip hop was a significant part of that. But the people that are not even shown on this like collage, there were people like Napoleon from Tupac's Outlaws, Native Dean, Tyson, Jurassic 5, Mos Def, Yassine Bey, who, I mean, I'm sure most of you have heard. And then I got into Arabic rap. When I found out that there were Palestinian hip hop artists out there like them, that just kind of changed the game. It was a little challenged linguistically because I tell people that that I'm watered down diaspora Arabic, but this is the sort of scene that I was listening to when I was in my teens. And if you can just draw your attention to the album on the right, the takeover, it's really hard to read, but the advisory says, parental advisory may cause your child to, cause your child's dean to rise. So I just thought that would just put that out there, because really what it comes down to is why I was listening to all of these people was that they were validating my identity as a Muslim. Now this group, Sons of Hodgar, this is a screenshot of an article that came out in a Seattle newspaper. You can see in the back, 206, that's their area code. They were a boy band, or not a boy band, no, they were rappers. They were literally rapping out of their closets. From left, Musa, Ahmed, Abdul, and Kareem are the Sons of Hodgar, a rap group from South King County. They were approximately, I think, my age. So just the fact that there were people my age out there rapping and rapping about things that I cared about. Remember one of their songs was called Insurrection, and it went something like, INSURR action, and it's time for some action, freedom for the Muslim, Black, White, Latin, and the Asian, rising as a nation, no matter what the destination. So like there's just these lyrics that were politically resonating with me. But, you know, a lot of these groups didn't end up, like these people are not still producing art in ways that they were when they were teenagers. But really that's kind of what it comes down to. Now, how are we on time, Arwa? Because I should have started a timer at the beginning, but I didn't.
6:15.
How many minutes in am I, and how much time do we have discussion at the end? Because I do know that I want to do that.
So you're 10 minutes in and you have 25 minutes left.
Okay, thank you.
Or
I'm
20.
probably gonna ask you that a few times. Actually, no, let me just, give me 2 seconds while I set a timer. Actually, you know what? Let's just start the next. Okay, this is gonna take a while to load because it is a YouTube video, maybe it won't. This is a song called Relate to Me, and it was literally one of my favorite songs. And this kind of gives you a little bit of a Canadian context. Look, who again is no longer still in the hip hop scene. I believe that he's a lawyer. But Cardinal Official, these guys are coming out of Toronto. T Dot, I believe, is how it's referred to in the song. And their song, this song was called Relate to Me. And it spoke to the power of hip hop. I'm gonna do a huge disclaimer. The brother Mohammed Zubair, who posted this this video to YouTube, wrote, finally managed to find the video from this track my cousin did a while back. Sorry for the extremely low quality, but this is the only print I could find. So I'm gonna extend that apology as well. The quality is not great. Hopefully you'll still be able to make out the sound, and we're gonna talk about some of the lyrics in this song in just a sec.
Another one from the almighty empire, you know what I mean? My man Wild Up, Cardinal Official, chilling with my man Wild Up, the evolutionary revolutionary, you understand? 100 spoken, all that good stuff. Yeah, circle click in this, don't know how we go. Yeah, one time, you know what I mean? Hip hop, yo, it's a beautiful thing. Brown people, yo, that's a beautiful thing. Black people, yo, it's a beautiful thing. Third world, ain't it a beautiful thing? Yo, life, ain't it a beautiful thing? The peace, yo, that's a beautiful thing. Yo, third world, ain't it a beautiful thing? That's a rap, yeah, what you can't, ain't no need to contemplate or debate. I smack the taste out your mouth and make your nose man straight. Period, your period has come to an end. The track was booty whack, can't be that it put you up in the blend. A scream revolution, watch they time scream. I'm trying to show these young cats that I'm more than just raps and green. The circle click ain't a team, we a regime. Storming the grassy stony lands like Afghan Mujahideen. routine. Now, how many have seen what I've seen and being what I've been? Refrain from controversy, keep my mind, body, and rest clean. Know what I mean? Nah, you don't. I'm trying to speak the truth, but accept it, y'all won't. So I lay low, preserve life, and stack dough. But I'm willing to put that all on the line, and that's for show. And there's one thing I'm gonna let y'all know before I go, that a man ain't a man if he ain't got nothing to die for. Relate to me. And yo, relate to me. All my cat rockin' heat. Relate to me. All the kids on the block. Relate to me. All the dogs on the lot. And yo, relate to me. Freedom fighters in the streets. Relate to me. All my third world people. Relate to me. Yo, relate to me. What? Relate to me. Yo, relate to me. Why look? Relate to me. Yo, for real. Hip-hop used to be a shield, but now it can't protect us from getting our blood spilled. Too many fools abusing this art form. See, the form is there, but all the art is gone. Now after use to increase the peace, now we increase the peace when we getting blasted by beats. This whole flow, when these pigs don't know, I get paid to rap. For show, yo, rolling up on me like I'm driving a dope whip. I push a 90 a quarter, trust it out, looking like. But you thinking that I'm a blood or crip? Gang banging, crack slanging, cause I'm just hanging with my dogs on the street. Got love for my dogs that hustle day and night, you see, cause my dogs gotta eat. Got love for my dogs that confront they beat. Got love for my dogs that stand firm and never retreat. Relate to me. Relate to me. All my cat rockin' heat. Relate to me. All the kids on the block. Relate to me. All the dogs on the lot. Yo, relate to me. Freedom fighters in the street. Yo, relate to me. All my third world people. Yo, relate to me. Yo, relate to me. Hey, yo, relate to me. What? Relate to me. Why look? Relate to me. Now it's still glide. You pushing on the vibe, and you swallow your pride and let that slide. You hustling, yay? That ain't everybody's vibe, but you gotta do what you gotta do to survive. Now, the rich and the poor, that's the great divide. If you in the middle, the poor think you're rich, and the rich think you're poor, so pick your side. Might find yourself alone when no one to ride, but homeboy, you got to do what you got to do to survive. See, 5 pillars and 5 prayers, paradise for the believers, and hellfire for the naysayers. I walk from Mecca, Medina, on stone and stand, and gamble caravan, you can make history now, just trying to make a brand. It's kind of small in the scheme of things, but like I said, got these younger cats dreaming of things, scheming of things, bringing me to them things to get mine. I represent the third world and Palestine. Relate to me. Relate to me. All my cat rockin' heat. Relate to me. All the kids on the block. Relate to me. All the dogs on the lot. Relate to me. Freedom fighters in the street. Yo, relate to me. All my third world people. Yo, relate to me. Yo, relate to me. Rob, relate to me. Yeah, relate to me. Why look? Relate to me. Hip hop. Ain't it a beautiful thing? Brown people. Ain't it a beautiful thing? Black people. Ain't it a beautiful thing? Third world. Ain't it a beautiful thing? Yo, life. Ain't it a beautiful thing? Peace out. Ain't it a beautiful thing? Thorough. Ain't it a beautiful thing? Apple West. Ain't it a beautiful thing? Why no? Homeboy collision. Carter now. Circle for love. 2G.
So you can even see that they ended that that music video with a quote by Che Guevara talking about love. And I was someone at that age who had Che Guevara quotes up and down my walls, made, of course, by myself, because where are you going to get that back in the day? And I kind of wanted to draw our attention to a few of the quotes that I think really made the case for hip hop in general. For me, as someone who was young Muslim, whose family came to these lands within the past 50 years. And so let's just start here. I scream revolution while Shaitan screams green. So here he's talking about capitalism, really, but he uses a word like Shaitan, which for me as a Muslim, you know, means it just means the devil. But the fact that he was able to keep that linguistic use and not translate it into English told me that this was something that it validated my experience. This is for me. This is for me to listen to, because I am the only one who understands it within the wider, you know, I'm talking about the wider North American population. For real, hip hop used to be a shield, but now it can't protect us from getting our blood spilled. Too many fools abusing this art form. See, the form is there, but all the art is gone. And for me, I told you earlier that I used to listen to the underground right? Like the indie artists. And that was just because while there was some, mainstream hip hop and rap that I could identify with for the most part, it just was something that was outside of, my world, my political view, my religious view. And so he spoke to that very specifically. And it's interesting that he says that this wasn't always the case with hip hop. And we know that many of the pioneers of hip hop were Muslim. I'm talking about hip hop period, not Muslim hip hop, but just in general, right? And so it's almost like people strayed from their roots. I dare not use the word bid'ah, but I'm going to say it anyway. And so here we have another quote. See, it's 5 pillars and 5 prayers. This is, he's very clearly referencing his religion. I walked from Mecca to Medina on stone and sand, camel caravan, used to make history, now I'm just trying to make a brand. For so many of us, our Muslim history is incredibly important, and it's something that we take a great pride in. But he also kind of juxtaposes it against this current reality that that we were living in, especially in a post 9/11 world, I should add. This last bit, I represent the third world, and Palestine spoke to me incredibly as someone who was interested in social justice. And I think that that really was, that kind of just brings it all together. Religious identity, your social justice values. This was the sort of thing that I was seeing in Muslim hip hop back in the day, and that's what rooted me. And in fact, I would even argue that, sometimes when the Friday sermons at the mosque, the khutbahs were not inspiring, this is what kind of, kept me and kept my spiritual faith high. That said, I've done an incredible amount of talking, and you've done some great listening. So I wanted to kind of move it into a discussion. Feel free to unmute yourself, popcorn style. I know I see some of the faces out there. If I know you personally, I will call on you. So do yourself a favor and just unmute yourself right now. Don't all rush at me at once. I want to have some questions. First of all, does anyone have any questions?
Well, if anyone has any questions, you can just put it in the chat, or you can message.
Can they not mute themselves? Unmute themselves? Okay. Ottawa, can you do me a favor, because I can't see the chat right now? Can you read out the questions?
Okay.
You know what? Let me stop sharing.
I think one question I have, and it's just knowing you and your love for hip hop and also your book, like, when you gonna get into hip hop?
Yeah, that's probably not gonna happen. So it's really funny. So like I said, MuslimHipHop.com back in the day used to have a forum, right? So it wasn't just that they were directing you to which artists were which, but there used to be like a discussion forum, and there were even a few people in Vancouver. Like, I never identified myself as a Vancouverite when I was on that forum, but I specifically remember at least, one brother who was on that forum as a Vancouver, and was like trying to bring people into Vancouver. Not a lot happened. I think Outlandish visited once, and I was a good kid. I wasn't about to, jump out my window and, go downtown. But in terms of like, when am I gonna go into hip hop? So the whole forum story was to say, I did at one point, because people would work on their art, right? So there was one section where people would kind of go back and forth. And there was one thread that I distinctly remember that kind of went over the rhyme meter for like for rap. And I was like, I'm never going to get into this. It just looked way too complicated. It's mathematical almost, right? Like, you have the 16. It's just so, I am going to stick to the unmetered poetry. But I'm incredibly, incredibly humbled that y'all think that I can go into it myself. Let's see here. haven't heard your work. Will you share? Yeah, so I shared a poem at the beginning, the Who Am I Challenge. A lot of the other poetry that I do is not related in any way, shape, or form to hip hop. So I can definitely share, but maybe towards the end. Let's see, what's been my biggest challenge as a poet? Oh, that's a good question. I think, okay, so I'm gonna put our community on blast a little bit, and I'm gonna explain why. As our Muslim community, I'll explain why I'm doing this. And to give you guys a little bit of Muslim history, recent Muslim history, outside of like colonialism and things like that, one of the ways that that governments and dictators control Muslim populations across the world is through the education system. And for many people across the world, many Muslim majority countries, students at around like what our equivalent would be like grade 12, they have to sit for a major exam, right? And that major exam determines what you're going to do in university. And what you're going to do in university is usually categorized, right? Like the hardest thing you can get into is medicine, right? And then unfortunately, the lowest thing that you can get into, or the grades that you need the least to get into, is Islamic studies. And somewhere in between, you have art. And so what ends up happening is you have a quote unquote class of religious scholars that are perhaps, they didn't work the hardest to get to where they're going to. They weren't looking for any sort of prestige. Artists are in the middle and they're not quite valued, where that's not something that is in our tradition pre-colonialism. Art, we know throughout the Muslim world, was incredibly valued. And so I think one of the biggest challenges that I'm facing is just the fact that our community isn't valuing this. So this conversation in of itself is, I feel like, a game changer. It could have been happening when I was 13, when I was those brothers that you saw, sons of Hodgar. There's literally a picture in that same article where they're rapping out of their closet, right? And he set up this like makeshift, like, I think he used even a pillow. I can't even tell what it was, but to like muffle the sound, right? So it was super low key. There's not a lot of support in terms of back then. Nowadays, I think things are a little bit different. So yeah, that could be perhaps just my own internal challenge. What advice do I have to young aspiring poets? Keep writing and write for yourself. I think that it really depends on why you're writing in the first place. If you're writing to make it on the poetry scene and get your name out there, then maybe you want to find yourself another job. But if you're doing it because art is incredibly satisfying to you, and it's a part of your own spiritual practice, then continue to write, and don't get discouraged because you will get rejection letters. Opportunities do pop up, and people are, there's so many arguments in recent years that people don't want to hear from, publication houses would not look for Muslim writers. That's not the case. It's never been the case that people don't want to hear from us and hear our voices. But even in the mainstream, you could, you'll make it, but you just have to, you really have to keep at it with your art. It's not something that you should be doing for the outside audience. I feel like that changes my tone when I start thinking about my audience. But if you're doing it for you, people are going to want to listen. So you guys are asking me really technical questions. What do most well-written poems have in common? It really sucks, but editing. nobody wants to edit, but, and it's really hard because you don't want to cut out your own writing. But going over your poem again and again, a million times over, is one thing. And then the second thing, which nobody tells you, is read. The more you read in general, it doesn't have to be poetry, but the more you're reading in general, the better your writing is going to become. And then, of course, read poetry. And there's some incredible Canadian Muslim poets. I'm thinking about Ifrah Hussein, but also some American, Amir Sulaiman. I'm sure you guys have heard of some of these names. I'm not currently writing a book. Thank you for whoever asked what book am I, oh, what book am I currently reading? Sorry, I read writing because that's my ego speaking. What book am I currently reading? That's not a good question because I'm reading multiple books at the same time and I'm gonna have to pull up my Goodreads to figure out. The book that I'm staring at right now is With the Heart in Mind, The Moral and Emotional Intelligence of the Prophet ﷺ by Mikael Ahmed Smith. And I believe that I actually borrowed that from two people that are in the audience right now. So I will get that back to you as soon as COVID is over. What else am I reading? I'm reading Policing Black Lives by Robin Maynard, and she goes through Canadian history. So it's about state violence against Black people from slavery to present. I certainly didn't know that there were 200 years of slavery here in Canada, and that segregation went up to 1983. The last, yeah, it just, yeah. Read that book. What else? Love in the Holy Quran. I'm reading that, and that's by Prince Ghazi. I'm also reading some Nizar Qabbani, which is poetry. He's a Syrian poet, and some Langston Hughes. But I'm the person who reads like 5 books at the same time and never gets through any of them. So maybe next year I'll be finished all of them. I'm sure that I'm going to be missing some questions, so I only have like a minute left. Biggest inspirations. So I did share a number of the different artists. Let me see here. Auntie Simi asked, do you use relate to me as both speak to me and establish your relationship with me? That song in particular, yeah, no, I think that resonates with me. Speak to me is what he was doing because he was speaking to me in a language that I understood. And in terms of establishing relationship, I mean, I feel like as someone who's listening to art, you're establishing a relationship with all the artists that you hear and that you listen to. I'm so sorry, I'm not gonna be able to, I didn't realize that we needed more time for discussions and we only have a little bit, like I think a minute, Arwa? Not even, probably, we've probably run out of time.
Yeah, we're like 2 minutes over, but it's okay.
I'm so sorry. I do want to honor the time and not go over. So my I don't know if you, let me see if I can screen share for one more second, but my my handle is on the screen and my email is that same thing, poetephemeral@gmail.com.